I think it's core to the fantasy of a monk, this idea of not having clothes. Welcome to part 3 of my D&D Monks But Good series. In part 1, I gave an overview of the class and its basic features and built 5 very different builds of the monk. And then I put those builds through a combat demonstration, and based off that combat demonstration, I'm going to draw some conclusions about the class, but first showing what these monks can do at higher levels. I am Ronald, the rules lawyer. I am a lawyer with many years experience teaching students in middle school and high school RPGs, and I've GM'd for 13 years, and my preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I had this video planned for 6 months actually, but I pushed it to the front because of the recent playtest for the next edition of D&D and the controversy around it. The monk is considered the weakest class in D&D, and the new playtest doesn't really address that. And I thought it'd be good to highlight Pathfinder's take on the monk. One, to promote Pathfinder, which I think more people should try out, but also to inform game design generally in TTRPGs. In part 1, I pointed people to TreantMonk's excellent video talking about how the monk is not a good class in D&D, and went over the 4 problems that he pointed out about it. I think the combat demonstration and this analysis I'm about to do will reveal that there are other issues to identify in the 5e monk. And I think there are specific things in Pathfinder's monk's design and also the overall design of Pathfinder that really will be interesting to other designers. So first, our 5 builds and what they can look forward to when they level up to level 6. At level 6 alone, there are 16 feats that they could choose from. A number of them are tied to having already invested in learning a stance, but even if you set those aside, if you don't have that stance, they can also take any of the monk feats at level 1, 2, and 4. So there's plenty of options. Duncan, our drunken master, can take Stumbling Feint. When he takes an action to enter Stumbling Stance, he already was able to get a bonus to his deception checks to try to feint and misdirect enemies to make them flat-footed or off guard to him. And if an enemy missed him in melee, they would also be off guard against his next attack. With this feat, however, and if he trained up his deception to expert, he can do a feint for free as part of Flurry of Blows, so 3 actions in 1. And if he succeeds on that feint, the foe is flat-footed off guard to both of his strikes. Or because he also can enter Tiger Stance, there is a feat called Tiger Slash, which says he uses both hands to do a Tiger Claw strike. It does extra damage, and he has the option of pushing them 5 feet away, which matters in Pathfinder because movement costs an action. And it does more bleeding damage if you critically hit. Or, because Duncan also likes to grapple and trip people with his athletic skill, he could take Whirling Throw. If he is grappling an enemy, he can spend an action to throw that enemy up to 30 feet away. It simply is an athletics check, and it doesn't suffer from the multiple attack penalty, and if he critically succeeds, they land prone. And remember, standing up costs an action. That will really stymie an enemy that really wants to be in his face, and of course he can throw them off a cliff or in a pool of lava. Kane, our crane monk, who took the defensive jumping crane stance, can take Crane Flutter as a 6th level feat. It's a reaction when he comes under a melee attack that immediately increases his armor class. And if they miss, he can wax off and try to hit their limb. So even if they are far away and using their extended reach against him, he can try to hit them back with a -2 penalty. P, our key monk, and Leshy didn't really feel like a key monk or elemental monk in the combat because she was only level 5. At level 6, she gets Key Blast. This will also increase her focus pool to 3, and she can use a variable number of actions to blast an increasingly large area and do more damage. It can be up to a 60-foot cone if she can put 3 actions into it, and she does force damage, which is good against nearly all enemies and really good against incorporeal creatures. And if they critically fail on their saving throw, they get pushed back also. Or she can take another key spell called Abundant Step, which lets her teleport as a single action up to her speed to any point that she can see. And she has a very fast speed as a monk, and that gets faster as she levels up. Helen, our weapon monk, can take 1-inch punch if she wants to hit particularly hard with a blow. It requires that she put more actions into it, but very good against resistances and against foes that she probably will miss a second attack on. Harper, our monastic archer, who can enter a stance that lets her use monk abilities, including Flurry of Blows with her bow, and also even Stunning Fist, can take Return Fire. Being in the back, she might be targeted by ranged attacks. She already has the Deflect Arrows feat to give her +4 to AC as a reaction. Now, as part of that reaction, she can instantly put it in her bow and fire, giving her an opportunity to make an attack with her reaction. It has to be an arrow, though. At higher levels, they can look forward to more feats. There's a total of 110 monk feats as of the day I'm making this video. A lot of these feats will jack up the stances even more. Here's a preview of some of them, and give more abilities associated with those stances. A lot of them give more key spells, and here's a list of all the key spells that are available in the game, and I'll go over a few of them. I'm going to highlight some of these higher level feats now. Wall Run is a great feat. As one action, you can run up to a wall and start running up it vertically. And what's cool is you get to do an action at the end of that before you fall. So you can do a Flurry of Blows against some flying dragon next to a wall. Especially good as your speed gets higher and higher. And what's really cool is that you have the Water Step feat, 6th level feat. You can run up flimsy surfaces like a waterfall. At level 10, there is Wind Jump, and this lets you gain fly speed for 1 minute. It is limited, however. At the end of your turn, you fall to the ground. But if you are 11th level or higher, you can find purchase in the air with a DC 30 acrobatics check, which gets easier and easier as you level up. I've seen this used to dramatic effect while a monk was under greater invisibility, and they were literally a ghost that people couldn't see in the battlefield that could fly anywhere. At level 12, there's Stance Savant that lets you enter a stance when you roll initiative. You don't have to use an action to enter a stance at the start of combat. So immediately you can run in, do a Flurry of Blows, and run away on turn 1. Next is Form Lock. This is a funny one. When you are grappling an enemy, you can try to squeeze them back into their original shape. So if that wizard turns into a dragon, bend a leg and try to put them back into original caster form. Helen, who took a 1-inch punch to do greater damage with a single strike, can take 1mm punch and lets her shove an enemy away while doing so. At 16th level, there is Medusa's Wrath. This is another key spell, very powerful, that when you strike an enemy, it takes 2 actions, they become slowed. That's a continuous tax on their number of actions per turn. And they make a saving throw at the end of each of their turns to avoid getting slowed further. And if they lose all of their actions, they become stone. This has the incapacitation trait, so it's less likely to turn a higher level creature into stone, but still a very cool ability. Also available is the classic ability Quivering Palm. This is another key spell, spends 2 actions, just hit them with a strike, and if you do that, they have vibrations in their body, and you can spend a single action saying a word of death. If they fail their save, they're stunned 3, basically lose a turn, and you get to keep repeating it. And this ability lasts for up to a month, but you can only have 1 in effect at a time. If they succeed on their save, it's a smaller stun, and you can't use it against them for another day. And if they critically fail, the target dies. This importantly has the incapacitation trait, so if they are higher level, they treat their degree of success as 1 degree better. This is a nice example of the 4 degrees of success in action. Now we get to the highest level feats. Level 18, Key Form. It's a key spell, spend 1 action, and you start to glow. Your hair, feathers, skin, and scales. And you get to fly. Your strikes do extra damage of a special type, and you have a corona that does that kind of damage. It can counter darkness effects, and you can make it flare out in a 30-foot emanation. A very dramatic ability, and because it's a key spell, if you can refocus, you could do this every combat. Enduring Quickness, which makes you permanently quickened. You get a 4th action per turn that can only be used to stride or to jump. Then there is Fuse Stance. This lets you combine 2 stances together. So long as they're compatible, you get to get the benefit of both stances. And finally, there is Impossible Technique. As a reaction, if you are not wearing armor and are not fatigued, if you ever fail a saving throw or get hit by an enemy, you force a reroll. And this is a reaction with no limit. This is the ultimate defensive ability. And that is only part of the picture as a monk. In Pathfinder, skills have defined uses, and there are feats that you can get, one of every even-numbered level, called skill feats, that let you do amazing things with your skills. So here's a few examples. Kip Up lets you, when you're prone, just stand up as a free action, and you don't provoke reactions. Then there's Wall Jump. You get to jump up and make a second jump off of that wall. You can also treat this jump as a high jump or long jump, which lets you go a really far distance. When you become legendary, which is possible at level 15 in athletics, you can do jumps off walls an infinite number of times. You'll essentially be like Mario. Then there is quick climb that lets you climb much faster, and when you become legendary, you get to have an actual climb speed equal to your speed, which is almost certainly going to be 50 or 60 feet, at least, by the time you get there, for each climb action. Then there's Cloud Jump, a legendary skill feat, which lets you long jump triple your roll. Almost certainly by this level, you can long jump over 100 feet, and you're normally limited by your speed, how long you can long jump, but you can spend additional actions to go your speed farther. And remember, monks have accelerated speed, so you can jump 150 feet. And if you have the quick jump skill feat, you can do this standing in place. Our TreantMonk can literally be standing in a narrow, confined space and spend 2 actions to jump 120 feet somewhere else. Cloud Jump also lets you jump vertically the number of your athletics check. So our TreantMonk could flying kick and jump 60 feet in the air while doing so. You also don't have to take monk feats. You can also take archetypes as a Pathfinder character. And archetypes are like themes that let you put a splash of that theme onto your main class chassis. A number of archetypes are based on other classes like Oracle or Swashbuckler, but a lot of them are not. There is Archer and Medic, just to name a couple of examples. For our Drunken Master, the Stumbling Stance Monk, who likes to make enemies flat-footed or off guard, maybe he would want to take a couple of feats in Rogue so that he can get the Sneak Attacker feat and get an extra d6 of damage when he hits a off-guard creature. If any of our monks were interested in guns, they could take the Bullet Dancer archetype and do Flurry of Shots. If any of them want to get an animal companion, they can take the Beastmaster archetype. And what's cool about animal companions is that they're minions. So because you have really good action economy as a monk, you can run in, make 2 attacks, and then spend one of your actions to command your animal. And your animal then has 2 actions. And your animal tracks its own multiple attack penalty. And of course, you can also take an archetype in a spellcasting class. Many spells cost 2 actions, but your Flurry of Blows lets you make 2 attacks with 1 action. So you could cast a powerful magical spell that calls for a saving throw, and then make your Flurry of Blows at full accuracy. So that covers the gamut of options, and now we're going to do an evaluation of the Pathfinder Monk class and talk about why it succeeds at what it does. First, there's an overall subject of dealing with the martial caster disparity, which I think is at play here. A lot of the things Pathfinder does are not specific to the monk, but affect all martial classes. And so I don't want to cover that subject again. I did cover that when I did my D&D Fighters But Good series, and specifically in part 3. So I recommend people check out that video if you want to see how Pathfinder dealt with the martial caster disparity. So the first thing to point out about the Pathfinder Monk is that it can fight. Monks in D&D 5e, as was pointed out in the TreantMonk video, have low damage, have some of the worst AC, and a lot of their core features that make them monk-like require a limited resource, their key points. So the first thing to point out is that they don't need key for many of their abilities. Their Flurry of Blows, their key action, does not require any resource for the monk to be able to do more attacks with their action economy. Then they have great defense. They have a hit die of 10, and in Pathfinder, you get your full hit die every level. So they get 200 hit points from their class by level 20. They also have Expert Armor class at level 1. They're the only one that has Expert Defense, and they go up to Legendary by level 17. So they, next to the Champion / Paladin, have the best armor class in the game. They also are expert in all saving throws at level 1. No other class gets this. And Pathfinder only has 3 categories of saving throws, like D&D 3rd edition. Fortitude for physical things, Reflex for dodging things, and Will for mental attacks. So there are no holes in proficiencies that you'll find in D&D 5th edition that creates a gap between proficient and non-proficient saves that gets exacerbated as you level up. So we will not have monks getting frozen in fear in the face of a dragon. And this actually is in keeping with the tradition of monks from 3rd edition. They had the best saving throws in that edition also. They also hit hard. We saw in the demo that they do 2 dice of damage per strike. A number of them did a d8 damage die starting at level 1, and there's actually a stance you can take at level 1 called Dragon Stance, which lets you do a d10 with your unarmed strikes. The reason they do 2 dice of damage is because the increase of DPR that martials have in Pathfinder is standardized and regulated through the runes system and the proficiency system. In Pathfinder, you get to place runes on your weapons that make them more accurate and do more dice of damage, and add special properties like flaming or crushing. Monks can put that on their hand wraps and mighty blows, which apply and buff all of their unarmed strikes. The monk may not do as much damage as the fighter in Pathfinder, and the barbarian, which are kind of the specialists in damage. However, they have their own niche. They're better against resistances because of their ability with Flurry of Blows to combine their damage before subtracting the resistance amount of a foe. So let's say if a animated statue has resistance 10 to all physical damage, our monk can make 2 strikes with Flurry of Blows, and that resistance is only subtracted 1 time from their total damage. Also, an important point that I think is worth making is that there's a reason to go into melee in Pathfinder. In D&D 5e, you often want to stay away from the enemies. Range attacks do just as much damage as melee, and you don't put yourself in harm's way by staying far away from the enemies. In Pathfinder, you can only add your strength to damage for 99% of characters, and you can only add your full strength to damage if you're in melee or using a thrown weapon. But those thrown weapons will tend to be inaccurate quickly the farther away you get from the foe. But as we saw in the combat demonstrations, they did much more damage while in an enemy's face. Even if you have a composite bow, you can only add 1/2 your strength bonus to your arrow damage. This basically gives more consequence to distance in a system where movement costs an action, and that further rewards the monk's freedom to be able to move very fast with a single action, because these same considerations apply to enemies also. So the monk can choose the terms of engagement. Next, we talk about build variety. Whereas Pathfinder doesn't have subclasses, you can build your style via class feats. There is a lot of choice and freedom in defining what your style is, and you can have more than one style for your monk via the stances system. Every stance that they could take with a class feat has its own unarmed attack. So a fist is not a fist is not a fist. There are many different strikes that you can get via stances. And you can spend an action to switch between stances. There's even a higher level feat that lets you switch stances in the middle of battle without spending an action. So instead of having to take a weapon in order to do more damage, some of these strikes can, like Dragon Tail, can do 1d10, and many of them do 1d8. They also have weapon traits that make them all feel different and make them useful in certain situations. So it's kind of cool, this idea of being a martial artist conversant with a variety of styles, using them against different enemies from round to round in a battle. You're not on a railroad of being one thing only. At level 1, they could take the gorilla stance and do the gorilla slam. They walk around on their knuckles, and they also get advantages in climbing. But there's a level 6 feat called Gorilla Pound, where they pound their chest before striking somebody, which lets them try to demoralize, intimidate a foe as a free action, and do extra damage if they are frightened by the time they're hit. An important stance to point out is Mountain Stance, because you can have a completely average dexterity, but this lets you, it's almost like armor. You get to have, by entering an implacable stance, get a bonus to your armor class just from your stance. It has a dexterity modifier cap to your AC of 0, however, so you would have to rely entirely on this stance. It gives you the Falling Stone Strike, which is strength dependent and does good damage. At level 14, there is the Mountain Quake feat, which lets you hit the ground and do damage to everybody within 20 feet. And if they fail, they also fall to the ground. There are also some higher level stances. You can only take at higher level. Here's Wild Winds Initiate, which lets you cast a key spell to enter the Wild Winds stance, which lets you do Wind Crash unarmed strikes, which are ranged attacks with a range of 30 feet. Also, finally, it supports using monk weapons, and your monk weapons can benefit from your monk abilities. You can use Flurry of Blows. We didn't see it in the combat demonstration, but Helen, with her bow staff with reach, could have hit two creatures very far away from each other with her bow staff. So it unlocks the variety of weapons with all of their various weapon traits and synergizes them with your monk abilities. You can use Stunning Fist, for example, with your weapon strikes. And here is where I'm going to point out a really cool high-level stance you can get called Whirling Blade. Every monk melee weapon that you have, even if it's not a thrown weapon, becomes a thrown weapon in your hand. This lets you throw such a weapon at a foe, so let's say a temple sword, and then from that foe it targets another creature. Its 10-foot range increment applies. So let's say you're under the haste spell, which gives you a fourth action which must be used on stride or strike. You can throw your temple sword at an enemy. It flies to another enemy, and then you can do 3 more strikes with that sword all on your turn. And at the end of your turn, it flies back to you. That is just really cool. Next, we have that Pathfinder monks are not MAD, which stands for Multiple Ability Dependent. This is jargon used among tabletop RPG players. In D&D 5e and also 3rd edition and Pathfinder 1st edition, if you were a monk, you often had pressure. You needed to get a number of ability scores high. You wanted high wisdom for your mystical abilities. You wanted a high constitution, especially since you were probably in melee and you had a low hit die of d8, and so on and so on. But the way Pathfinder works is you can just get an 18 in either strength or dexterity, and you don't need to do key abilities in the first place. Many of those key abilities don't call for a saving throw. In Pathfinder, wisdom is not required. Your armor class is not reliant on how high your wisdom is. You just need a good dexterity or the mountain stance, and the proficiency system takes care of the rest for you. You are an expert, so you get to add your level plus 4 to your AC starting at level 1. That catches you up with the armor-wearing classes. So while at level 1, every other class can, if they invest into AC, get a 17 or 18, you can get a 19 at level 1. Also, your abilities use what's called your class DC, at least those abilities that are not key spells. Your class DC is based off of your key ability, which is either strength or dexterity. Wisdom is not part of this. So when you do a Stunning Fist against an enemy, you can have a low wisdom, but they are still being forced to save against a very high number. There are some key spells that you want to have a good wisdom for, like a Key Blast, but you don't have to take those powers. And finally, Pathfinder is generous with ability boosts. You get 9 boosts at level 1, and every 5 levels, starting at level 5, you get 4 boosts into 4 different ability scores. The system forces you to spread them out, but also removes the pressure of having to put everything into one single stat. So you can easily get a high strength, dexterity, and wisdom by level 5 if you want to. Next, they are not dependent on key. If you watch the combat, you probably noticed that they did very classic monk abilities, but didn't have to spend a limited resource to do that. There are key spells that use key, but those are optional. The core monk abilities, like Flurry of Blows, they can use every single turn without spending a resource. And class feats and skill feats give them new abilities. There was the class feat Flying Kick, to leap up into the air and make a strike against an airborne enemy. Or Stand Still, our weapon fighter, interrupting an enemy's turn to hit them while they moved. None of those required key points. Also, entering stances. That doesn't require a key either. These are all very monk-like things. There are skill feats that are actions or activities themselves, or let you do unique things like quick jump or wall jump. And then something that I think is important to underline, the fact that Flurry of Blows did not require key meant that you are not relying on key to do more damage, to do more attacks. Your DPR, let's use that term, is not reliant on you using a limited resource. Your damage is consistent in a 10-round fight as compared to a 5-round fight. Also, you can run out of key, but you can recover them quickly with 10 minutes, and your party is probably going to be using that 10 minutes anyway to patch up wounds and doing other things. And so you won't be in the position of begging the party to rest while you recharge your key. And also, I just think, frankly, it's easier to track if your pool doesn't go above 3 and everything costs 1 point. Many players might find that they don't even need to write down their key total. They'll just remember how many abilities they used this combat. And I think special attention needs to be given to Stunning Fist. In D&D 5e, the counterpart, Stunning Strike, is considered perhaps the most important part of the monk's power budget because it can be so powerful. This is what it does. Starting at 5th level, when you make an attack against a foe, a melee attack, you can spend 1 key point to force them to make a Constitution saving throw, and if they fail, they are stunned until the end of your next turn. Being stunned sucks. You become incapacitated, which means you cannot take any actions or reactions. You also cannot move, and you automatically fail a number of saving throws, and attack rolls against you all have advantage. The problem with that is that this was too swingy. If the DM had built up a big villain and this were to succeed against the foe, then it can be a very anticlimactic fight. They perhaps do not a single thing during the entire battle if the monk won initiative. And also because it was such a powerful, potentially powerful ability, it often sucked your key points from other flavorful monk key abilities that you would save up in order to do stunning strike, stunning strike, stunning strike. But also, it might have no effect at all in a fight because the monk perhaps is multiple ability dependent and couldn't invest into their wisdom. And many foes have good constitution saves. So what does Pathfinder 2e do? First, it is automatic. No key is required. You don't have to make a decision every turn whether you're going to spend that key. Basically, you just do a flurry of blows, and if they both targeted the same creature and you did damage with one of your strikes, then they make a fortitude save. We also see that it employs the 4 degrees of success system in Pathfinder. If they fail their save, they become stunned 1, and if they critically fail, they become stunned 3. And, importantly, the stunned condition is weaker in Pathfinder. There's a lot of text there, but I'll explain it really quickly. Basically, you just get attacks on your actions. First, you cannot make any reactions, yes, but the number of the stunned condition is the number of actions you lose on your next turn, and you have 3 actions. And importantly, it does not give you any defensive penalties. You are not easier to hit when you are stunned. So it doesn't lead to a snowball effect. So the end result is that you have a consistent ability that is not broken. And you can do this until the cows come home. And importantly, this has the incapacitation effect. That is the trait that if the enemy is higher level than you are, they get to treat their saving throw as 1 degree of success better. So stunned 3 will never happen against a higher level foe. This makes the level matter, and also means that lower level foes who use incapacitation effects against the party will not shut them down. So a final point, freedom. I think it's core to the fantasy of a monk, this idea of not having clothes, being able to do many things on your turn, being able to defy laws of physics through your physical self is embodied in this word. And under this banner, I will talk about turn variety. In Pathfinder, you have the 3-action economy. You are often not doing the same sequence of things every turn, moving and attacking and moving away, which would get punished by an opportunity attack from the foe. With the 3-action economy and the combat demonstration, we saw them stride 2 times and make a flurry of blows, or stride and flurry of blows and stride away. Everything was exchangeable for each other. This gave just more mechanical freedom to mix things up more. There is no bonus action system of things that are, because of the label they have, are walled off, and you have to use your bonus action bucket to save that for those actions with that category. That also included entering your stance and changing stances in the middle of battle. And the way Pathfinder works, Flurry of Blows has the effect of freeing up actions for the monk instead of occupying them. In D&D, when you use your monk abilities to do more attacks, that occupies your bonus action, which, especially if you have multiclassing, you may want to use for other things instead. There's so far been a design choice to have your attack routine include your bonus action, which has the effect of, if you want to do as much damage as possible, you have to write off everything else you could possibly do with your bonus action. This ends up feeling more restrictive in play. Another important thing that's easy to miss is that there are no opportunity attacks. In the combat demonstration, a tactic was used of moving in, attacking, and then moving away. Because there are no opportunity attacks, you're not punished for doing that. And you can put in 2 strikes because you have Flurry of Blows. This feels very monk-like to me, especially when combined with your incredible speed. You can move in with your 40-foot speed, attack 2 times, and move away. And if they are a creature with even average speed, they have to spend 2 actions just to get to you to make 1 attack. Finally, a key ingredient is the multiple attack penalty. This punishes you, or more accurately, makes it less effective to make a follow-up attack on your turn. It gets increasingly less accurate. This means that you have an incentive to try other things, including movement, during your turn. And because movement costs an action, this seems counterintuitive, because movement costs an action, movement is more powerful because you force enemies to have to move to you, especially consider the fact that you have incredible movement. And so many classes already in Pathfinder, by the multiple attack penalty, are incentivized to try to find a third action to do. Battle medicine to heal up an ally, or demoralize an enemy. Because of Flurry of Blows, you effectively have 3rd and 4th actions if you consider attacking twice as 2 actions. You get to pull off Flurry of Blows and do 2 other things while standing next to a foe, if you want to. And finally, you likely are not fighting with weapons, and so you have 2 free hands that you can do things with. You could do battle medicine while having a hand to hold up a potion or important magic item for some other purpose. This gives you opportunities to vary your turns even more. So those are the things I wanted to highlight in the Pathfinder Monks design. I hope to have shown through this explanation how mechanically it expresses the feeling and flow that I think people are looking for in the monk. So if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, ring the bell for my upcoming analyses, and I want to point you to a few other videos you may be interested in that I've done. I did a similar series on the fighter class of Pathfinder that also goes into the martial caster disparity and how I think Pathfinder solved that problem. Then I did a series of critiques of the playtest by Wizards of the Coast that they're still going through for the next edition. I have a lot of thoughts on the design, positive and negative, as well as critiques of this not really being a playtest, about them needing to call it a new edition, about having clear design goals, etc., etc. I say a lot of things in this series. You might be interested in that. There are going to be links at the end of this video and also in the video description. Also, I've done a lot of combat demonstrations on this channel, and I'm going to include a link to those if you're interested in those. Also, join my Discord community. I personally am active and interact with people there all the time, and also there's just a great community there that will help you learn Pathfinder, or also enter a Pathfinder game. We have people there who volunteer to run the beginner's box, which is the best way to learn the game. And also we have a drop-in organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern, where you get to take your character from adventure to adventure and have them earn XP and loot. Lastly, support my Patreon, which has exclusive content, including the 2 campaigns I've been running, showing Pathfinder 2e to D&D YouTubers, and other exclusive content. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. This was a labor of love, and that's it. I have been Ronald, the Rules Lawyer, and I'll see you next time.